Hey, what's going on guys? Today I'm bringing you another Warlock build, and this is probably going to be my last build video of the series for this season, as the new one starts at the end of this month. But this build is one that I wanted to cover for quite some time now, because it has so much variety to it in terms of using the same setup but changing just one or two things to achieve a pretty powerful and unique build. Now I have two setups for this build, and these are going to be using the same exotic, the Contraverse Hold, but instead using a different grenade and a few adjustments to the subclass aspects and fragments. Now the first variant is going to feature the magnetic grenade, which will consume for a short range blast that is pretty powerful. It will melt enemies down quickly, but this version of the build is best used in easier content, although as you can see I am using this build in a master loss sector whilst 20 underpowered, and it is performing just as good anyway. The second version of the build will use a vortex grenade, and I do prefer this version a lot more in endgame content, mostly because even if you're bad at throwing grenades, you're most likely 9 times out of 10 going to get that grenade back within about 5 to 10 seconds, and the reason for this is because of the fragment Echo of Remnants. It will make the void grenade last just that tiny bit longer for the Contraverse Hold to trigger the next grenade regen phase to get that grenade back instantly when using it, assuming it's still causing damage to an enemy, which is why this version is best used in endgame content. And actually weirdly enough, this version of the build performs actually worse in easier content because of that exact reason, that when you throw it and it kills ads too quickly, you're not going to get that second regen phase triggered, so you're best using the magnetic grenade for easier stuff and the vortex for harder content. Now because we're using the Contraverse Hold Exotic, we will want to charge the grenade by holding down the grenade before throwing it, and what this does is give you damage resistance while charging it, and charge void grenades return energy on hit, which is about half of the grenade energy. And as I say, because this exotic has a 4-second cooldown, you will be capped with the magnetic grenade, but with the vortex one, you will trigger the regen again if it's still damaging enemies after that 4-second cooldown. So if you're using the Echo of Remnants fragment, that vortex grenade is going to last 50% longer, which is enough to trigger that regen the second time, which will instantly give you that grenade straight back. And if you were unfortunate and on both builds didn't get the grenade back, just getting a few kills and using your other abilities will, so we will have that plan B to achieve that, because after all this is a grenade build, so we're focused only on getting those grenades back as quick as possible. We ain't messing about. Now before I get into the setup of both builds, here's a quick explanation of how each build will work. So for the magnetic focus, you'll first hold and charge the grenade and then throw it at a bunch of ads. This in most cases will give you half of that grenade energy straight back. If you have armor charge stacks, then a little bit more. You'll then use your rift and melee to top off the rest of that energy to get the grenade back. And if you don't have those abilities ready, using Devour and getting kills will give us that grenade energy and instantly refresh our health at the same time, and then you can pick up any orbs and void breaches to refresh all the buffs to give that grenade energy. So not only are you going to be getting infinite grenades, but you're also unkillable as well while all these buffs are active. And to top this off even further, you're going to occasionally generate elemental orbs, which you can pick up and throw for a chance of heavy and special ammo, which is a nice little feature to have for easier content. But as we are also using the monochromatic perk this season too, we'll be able to chain between the void abilities and void weapons for a DPS buff, so we really are going to town with this build, and you can see how powerful this really is if you can keep that loop consistent. As for the vortex focus, you're going to do exactly the same thing pretty much. There are a few slight changes to the build itself though, just so we can maximize our grenade energy's return rate. So you'll start by, as always, charging and throwing a grenade, but you will ideally want to have the grenade damaging enemies constantly if you want to instantly get that grenade back, which is why I strongly recommend this version of the build in things like a Grandmaster Nightfall or Master Raid. It's basically just an extra source of free DPS, and has been one of my favourite builds to use when soloing harder content whilst underpowered. Now for the setup of the magnetic grenade, you'll want to start obviously with the magnetic grenade. Now don't worry about what the grenade does, because we're actually not throwing it uncharged. We're always going to be charging it before throwing it. So use the Aspect Chaos Accelerant, because this will make the magnetic grenade release a short range void blast, which is really strong. But the downside is that it is a short range blast, so you will need to pretty much be in the enemy's face half the time for it to actually hit them. The second aspect is Child of the Old Gods. We're using this so that our rift can send a void sword to weaken enemies and give us ability energy to all our abilities. Pretty straightforward. I am using a healing rift by the way, which is what you want to use ideally. And then for the fragments we have Echo of Starvation, so that picking up orbs and void breaches gives us Devour, and then kills while Devour is active is going to give us health and grenade energy. This is going to be our primary source of topping off that grenade energy that we need. We also have Echo of Undermining so that we can weaken enemies, just makes our grenade that little bit stronger. Echo of Harvest, so defeating weakened targets creates an orb and a Void Breach, so this is our primary source of spawning those, and then Echo of Instability so that we can have volatile rounds with our Void weapons. For the mods, you want 2 Ashes to Assets in the helmet so that we can get supers faster on grenade kills. Arms, you just want 2 grenade kickstarts, which will give us that extra grenade energy when using it. Chest, we have our damage resist mods. Legs, we have our Void Scavenger mod and 2 innovations for reduced grenade cooldown when picking up orbs. And in the class, 1 distribution and 2 bombers for basically the same thing, but we'll get that extra energy when using our rift. And that is basically the setup for the magnetic grenade, which is what you want to use in easier content. For harder content, I prefer the Vortex version, and there are a few changes. So firstly, you're going to want to make sure you have the Vortex grenade on, and we'll continue to use the first aspect Chaos Accelerant, but with the Vortex grenade, this is instead going to increase the size and duration of it. Then the second aspect is actually not going to be Child of the All Gods, but instead Feed the Void, so that we can get Devour when defeating enemies with Void abilities. This is so that we can free up a fragment slot for other things. So the first fragment we have, again, are Echo of Undermining, like the first setup, but we're now instead using Echo of Expulsion, so Void ability final blows cause our targets to explode. Echo of Remnant, so that grenade will last even longer, enough to instantly refresh it in harder content. And Echo of Instability for, again, the volatile rounds like the first one. For mods, Helmet is going to remain the same with the 2 Ashes to Assets, but you want to have a Void Cypher mod to spawn orbs, which I mean you should be doing anyway for multiple reasons. For the arms, we have the 2 grenade kickstart mods as usual, but this time we wanted Firepower to spawn orbs on grenade kills, which previously was done by weakening enemies on the first setup, but as we're not able to do that with this one, you are going to want to use the Firepower mod. For the chest, legs and the class, these are going to be exactly the same as the first setup. So again, here's a reminder, this is the full setup for the magnetic grenade, the first one, and then this here is the setup for the Vortex one. I would make sure that you prioritize your stats in resilience and discipline as your first priority, and then if you can, try and get recovery to 100 as well, and that would be your ideal triple 100 Void build for the Warlock this season. Now we are using artifact perks this season, so if you're wanting to use this build in any other season other than Season of the Witch, this won't be relevant, but if you are using this build for Season 22 up until November 28th, then you'll want to make sure that you have these artifact perks on, as they will benefit the build even further. So we have the Elemental Orbs Void to spawn Void Orbs, Elemental Fury for bonus damage against champions with abilities, Communal Pickups if you're using the build while in a team, Refreshing Pickups for extra energy when picking up orbs, Monochromatic for extra damage with your Void weapons and abilities, chaining between them both, and Elemental Munitions for a chance to spawn ammo when killing adds with Void Orbs. And honestly, I have to admit, this build is probably the only decent build on a Warlock right now this season, since the majority of builds for Warlocks have been nerfed in recent seasons. So if you're looking for a top tier Warlock build, then this Void build is definitely one to consider for the remainder of this season for Destiny 2 Lightfall Season of the Witch, or Season 22. But if this build isn't one for you, then as always be sure to check out the playlist down below for more like this, as I do cover them every season here on the channel. But for now guys, go cause Void Chaos with this build, and I'll see you guys in the next one.